Until now we've been talking about Yitzchak Avinu and the story of Yitzchak. So this parak, as I mentioned before, this parak and the next parak is a whole tangent about Techiyas HaMeisim and different things that have to do with Techiyas HaMeisim and the historical examples of Techiyas HaMeisim and different stories and different ideas about Techiyas HaMeisim. But the first few lines of this parak starts off with something about Yitzchak Avinu and then it segues into Techiyas HaMeisim. So we'll start off speaking about Yitzchak and then start speaking afterwards about Techiyas HaMeisim. Says the parak. Ksiv, it says in the pasuk in Parshas Toldos, Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi, and Yitzchak planted in that land. Right? So we know that Yitzchak lived in Eretz Yisroel, and it says that there's the psukim talking right after Yaakov and Esau were born. It says that Yitzchak planted in that land. Well, let's say over the whole pasuk. Vayizra Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi, Yitzchak planted that land. Vayimtza b'shana hahi mea sha'arim, and he found in that year 100 times. We'll see exactly what that means. 100 times. Vayivarcheu Hashem, and Hashem blessed Yitzchak. Fine. So what's happening over here? Rabbi Eliezer says. Rabbi Eliezer's question and the answer over here is very difficult to understand. What was Rabbi Eliezer bothered by, and how's he answering exactly his question? But first we'll read it, and then we'll try to understand it better. V'chi Yitzchak zara dagan chas. Did Yitzchak plant grain? Chas v'shalom? What's the question? What's the question? Did Yitzchak plant grain? What do you mean? Did Yitzchak plant grain? What's the chas v'shalom? Like as if he did plant grain, there's something wrong. Chas v'shalom, heaven forbid to say that Yitzchak did such a thing. What's bothering him over here? Rather, I found in a place in a journal called Kovetz Talpiyah in volume Daled, page 392. It brings there b'shem somebody named Rabbi Shaya Epstein. Maybe he's a cousin of yours. He says that it's a mistake over here in the Medrash. Instead of saying Chas v'Shalom, it's really supposed to say Rosh Tevis Ches Vav, and Ches Vav is supposed to stand for Chita v'Sa'ira. So he reads it as V'chi Yitzchak zar daga and Chita v'Sa'ira. Did Yitzchak plant grain, meaning wheat and barley? It still doesn't explain what the question is. Yeah, why not? That's what the pasuk says, right? Okay, so we'll have to explain what the question is. Answers the Medrash. I guess no. El lokach es kol Maaser mamoinoi v'zorat tzedakah lanim. No. Rather, what this pasuk means, when it says that Yitzchak planted in that land, means that he took a Maaser of his money and gave it to the poor people, and he planted tzedakah for the poor people. Like elsewhere in the pasuk in Hosea, it says Ziru lachem l'tzedakah. You should plant it for tzedakah. So too, that's what Yitzchak was doing. He was planting tzedakah. Okay, so the problem over here is like self-apparent. Like, what was the Medrash bothered by? V'chi Yitzchak zara dagan chas v'shalom, and what's the answer? So the Radal says what I understand to be half of a mahalach to explain this. The Radal says like this. The Radal, from what I see, only explains the question. It doesn't explain what the answer is. But he says like this. This is the Avos in the time of the Avos. So Eretz Canaan did not yet belong to them, even though Hashem gave a promise to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that they're going to own Eretz Yisroel, but it didn't yet belong to them. So he says, while they lived in Eretz Yisroel, even Yitzchak, who lived his entire life, he lived in Eretz Yisroel, but they were always going from place to place in Eretz Yisroel. Avraham Avinu was, in Beersheba, he was in Hebron, he was in different places. Yaakov Avinu was in Shechem, Hebron, he went to Beersheba, Yaakov Avinu was all over the place, right? So Yitzchak was all over the place. He lived in Hebron, he went to Gevurah, right, which is also most like considered part of Eretz Yisrael, the Gaza area, right? So Yitzchak was also moving all over the place. He didn't stay in one place. And what?
Sorry, I just remember something about the previous question. Remember when we learned about Cain and Hevel, that Hevel was in the high level because it was a right son.
Yeah.
Instead of being someone that is a Zorea.
Yeah.
Instead someone that take care of the fields. He's in a lower level of a target or whatever than someone that who's a right son. Because the son itself
is moving.
Itself is in a higher level than the plant. Something like that. Remember we learned that back then? Maybe that's the Chas v'Shalom here. You're telling us that Yitzchak, maybe that he was doing things because he, I don't know, was doing something that he was supposed to, someone in a lower level was supposed to do?
I hear. The Radal's making a similar point. The Radal's point is more that because the Avos didn't yet own Eretz Yisroel, so he says that they were always moving around, and therefore that's why they were Royet Tzayin. He says this. That's why they were Royet Tzayin, so that they can move from place to place and not have a specific place that they could call themselves, because they didn't really own any part of Eretz Yisroel yet. And the Radal adds in parentheses, says, we know that the 400 years of the exile of the Jews, right, started from when Yitzchak was born. So Yitzchak lived in Eretz Yisroel. So even though he lived in Eretz Yisroel, there was some element of exile to what Yitzchak was doing. So the Radal explains the Medrash's question is like this. So would you say that Yitzchak, even though he was in the Golus in Eretz Yisroel, would you say that he was going against what Hashem wanted, and he would stay in one place and farm that land? Of course not. It makes more sense to say that Yitzchak was a shepherd as opposed to a farmer. So why would it say in the pasuk Vayizu Yitzchak ba'aretz hahi? That's how the Radal explains the Medrash's question. Now, the Medrash's answer he doesn't talk about, or at least I didn't see that he explains what the answer is. So there's something lacking. I was like, what's the answer? That's one approach from the Radal. So I found another approach. I saw this in the Sefer Torah Shlema in Bereshis, Parak Chavav, Pasuk Beis, Ois Nun Tes. The Torah Shlema says like this. He reads it a little bit differently. He adds in a word. He says like this. V'chi Yitzchak zora dagon bilvad chas v'shalom. When Yitzchak planted the grains in his land, right? So he adds the word bilvad, only. So the Medrash's question is, did Yitzchak only plant grains? Was he only doing it for the sake of planting grains so that he'll have what to eat for sustenance, whatever? Chas v'shalom, the Yitzchak had these, motives that were, let's say, selfish motives, that he was doing it just so he would be able to eat. Ella answers the Medrash, rather, really, Yitzchak's main motive was he was planting grain so that he would have something to give to poor people, to give Maaser from, and to give Tzedakah to Aniyim, and that's what was Yitzchak's main motive. And that's how he explains the Shakla V'Tayr we hear in the Medrash. Did Yitzchak do it just for selfish purposes? And the answer is no. He did it. He planted so that he could give tzedakah. That was the question. That's the answer. That's the Torah Shlema's pshat. And I saw it brought down b'shem the Lubavitch Rebbe in Likutei Sichos Krach Hey. That same pshat, more or less that same pshat. Then I found another pshat in how to exactly understand what the Medrash is saying over here. That's in the Marzu sort of says this pshat, but the way the sefer that I found says it a little bit better. But the Marzu says, first of all, he says the same thing. He says the words chas v'shalom in this context. He says tzarich iyon. Like, why does it say v'chi Yitzchak zara dagan chas v'shalom? So what if he was zara dagan? He planted grain. Why is it a chas v'shalom to say that he did such a thing? And then the Marzu says that ulai, the reason is like this, because it says in the pasuk vayizra Yitzchak. Yitzchak planted it. That's mashma that he himself planted it. But it says, as opposed to, let's say, when it's talking about the wells, there's a whole story with Yitzchak and Avimelech about the wells. So it says over there, Vayachparu avdei Yitzchak. The servants of Yitzchak dug the wells. Right? So it sounds like Yitzchak had so many servants, he had servants that were able to do things. So why did he himself have to plant the dagon? He should have had his servants do it. What's the shvach in him doing it himself? He should have had his servants do it. And he adds another nukuda that says, like by Avram Avinu, it says the pasuk Vayita Eishel beVer Sheva. Avram Avinu planted an Eishel in Be'er Sheva. So you would ask, what Avram Avinu was like he was a horticulturalist. He was going and planting things. That's what Avram Avinu was. So no, the Medrash says that Eishel is Achila Lina Shtia, that he made like a free hostel that people could come and eat and drink or whatever. So that's what it means that Avram Avinu planted an Eishel. But Sam to say that Yitzchak planted dagon, like Mechite, so that he himself would do such a thing. He should have his servants do it. That's why the Marzu explains the question. It doesn't necessarily explain the answer, but it could be what we're going to say is going to explain the answer even according to the Marzu. What? Yeah. So the answer is going to start like this. There's the famous Gemara in Brachos on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Beis. world famous Gemara. The Gemara says, Lamahim Beis in Brachos, Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis taught. It says in the pasuk, "V'yosafta diganecha." It's the pasuk we say in Krishna that you shall gather your grain. Ma Talmud Lemer. Why does it say that you should gather your grain? What's the chiddush of the pasuk? Lefish Emar. So the Gemara says, because it says in the pasuk elsewhere, Lo Yomush Sefer Torah Zemipicha, that this Sefer Torah should never be removed from your mouth. Yochol Dvarim Kichsavam. You would think that means literally that you should never stop learning and you should never engage in agriculture. Talmud Loimer v'yosafta degonecha. So therefore, the Torah has to tell us v'yosafta degonecha. You should gather your grain. Haneg bahen minag derech eretz. You should act in the way of derech eretz, in the way of the land. That people are oisik in farming. So you should also be oisik in farming. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. That's what Rabbi Shmuel says. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says no. He argues. He says, "Efshar Adam Cherish b'Shas Charisha." Is it possible that a man is going to plow in the time of plowing? V'Zariah b'Shas Zariah, and plant in the time of planting. V'Kurtz b'Shas Ktsira, and harvest in the time of harvesting. V'Dash b'Shas Isha, and threshing in the time. V'Zariah b'Shas Ruach, and winnow in the time of the wind. These are all different seasons of the year, right? So it takes up the whole year to make proper produce. If he's going to be busy doing that, Torah matahelav. Where's the Torah going to be upon him? Rather, says Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Ela bizman sheYisrael oisen etzayin shel makom malachta nasas al yidei achirim. When the Jews are doing the ratzon of Hashem, the will of Hashem, so then their work will be done by other people. Shneimer, it says in the pasuk, V'im duzlorim uru'u tzeinchem. The foreign people are going to stand up and they're going to shepherd your flocks. Etc. When Jews aren't doing what Hashem wants, so then the opposite is going to occur. That the Jews are even going to be responsible for other people's work. Right? That's what the Gemara says over here. I found a sefer called Oil Torah. It was printed in Krakow in the year Tov Reish Pei Tes. I wrote it down. Oil Torah in the Krakow Tov Reish Pei Tes, the Cheshvan of Tov Reish Pei Tes, on page 142, Kuf Mem Beis. It brings this pshat b'shem Rav Pinchas Hirschprung. That's all. You ever heard of Rav Pinchas Hirschprung? He was the Rav of Montreal. It was a big Talmud Chacham before the war. He learned in Yeshivas Chachmei Lublin Yichal by Meir Shapiro. And after Meir Shapiro was niftar, I believe in like 1933 or something, so he became the boichen of the yeshiva. It means that he was the examiner. Like if you want to get accepted to the yeshiva, so he would give you the test. And the test was that you had to know 200 blot Gevurah by heart. That was the test to get into the yeshiva. To know 200 blot of Gevurah. By heart. By heart to get into the yeshiva. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, right. Kilo. Yeah, for sure. So Pinchas Hirschprung. If you want to, you go open the door if you want also. But Pinchas Hirschprung says pshat based on this Gemara. It says that in this Gemara we see that if you're doing Ritzayin Shel Makom, what? Yeah, because of the light. If you're doing Ritzayin Shel Makom, so then your work is going to be done by other people. Yeah. So he says that was the shaila of the Medrash. If you're doing Ritzayin Shel Makom, your work is going to be done by other people. So why does the pasuk say that Vayirza Yitzchak Pa'aretz Ahi? Yitzchak was the one doing the planting. He's doing the Chayr. Yitzchak was Chas V'Shalom to say that Yitzchak wasn't doing Ritzayin Shel Makom, and he himself would have to do the planting instead of other people doing it for him. So why does it say he did it? So answers the Medrash. Beautiful answer. The Medrash answers that Yitzchak's Iker Kavana was planting so that he'll have food and grain or whatever to give to poor people, to give Maaser, to give Tzedakah, etc. That was Yitzchak's Iker Kavana. If his Iker Kavana was for the Mitzvah, so we have a rule, the Gemara in Kedushin in the beginning of the second parak says, when it comes to a Mitzvah boy yesim b'shluchay. The Mitzvah is more with you, with him, with a person himself, than with his agent. So even though you're right, someone else is going to take care of their work, But Yitzchak didn't look at planting the grain as work that someone else should do. He looked at it as, this is a way to do a mitzvah. So if it's a way to do a mitzvah, I want to do it myself rather than to have someone else do it for me. And that's what the Medrash is answering.
Yeah, it could have a step on that, because if they're right on, it says that they didn't necessarily stay for long in the same place.
Yeah.
Whatever Zriya he was doing there, after he abandoned it, it will take time to transform himself in with a plan to be koiter. So the person will maybe the anim, the poor people, they will find it. They'll never know who planted it.
Yeah.
Had tzedakah maybe. It doesn't. We could just plug it in.
Something like that. He was doing. You're saying he was a shepherd, but he was planting things and then leaving the area so that he could anonymously give tzedakah.
I don't know.
It could be. I mean, that's not. I don't think that's what the Medrash is saying over here, but I hear such an idea.
I don't think the Christian needed people to give them tzedakah. It's like, the Shras and Hebrews, if they need tzedakah, they just, okay, give me your money, your wife. That's Christian, they're Shratas over there. I don't think they needed this tzedakah. They could just take it from his will, against his will. They wouldn't have asked a white man with a beard over there.
What was the result of this planting? It was he got 100-fold.
Oh, yeah, so we'll get to that in a minute.
But that seemed very relevant. Why it was he who planted it, and not maybe his avodah. His chld caused there to be such growth.
Okay, we'll get to that in a minute.
Is he doing the kind mitzvah tzedakah if he gives it to Plishtim?
You want to know, is there tzedakah by a guy?
The Rambam says they should.
Say there's tzedakah by a guy. But first of all, we're talking about a time when there was no such thing as a Jew and a guy. Mm-hmm. So it could be this is totally if the others had a din ben Noach or a din Yisrael, that goes back into that. But
there's no difference between a guy from Shem and a guy from Kom.
I don't know. Yeah, that's his favorite topic, Shem and Chom Yafes. There's another nukud over here. In the Chasam Sefer Mesechus Sukkah, Daf Lamed Vav, he brings this machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, whether a person should engage in agriculture or he should only devote himself to learning. And the Chasam Sefer says like this. He says that the machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is only in Eretz Yisroel. Because in Eretz Yisroel, it could be that the agriculture itself is a type of mitzvah, there's a tzad mitzvah to it. So there, Rabbi Shmuel would say that you should rather engage in agriculture at the proper time than to learn Torah. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai argues and says, no, you should always learn Torah, even in Eretz Yisroel. That's what the Chasam Sefer says. And then the Chasam Sefer says, and then Maaser, we passing like Rabbi Shmuel. That's what the Chasam Sefer says. Maaser, we passing like Rabbi Shmuel. So in chutz la'aretz you should only do learning, and in Eretz Yisrael you should also do agriculture in the time of agriculture. That's what the Chasam Sefer says. The kasha in the Chasam Sefer, I saw this kasha in the Sefer Inayim L'Mishpat from Rabbi Yitzchak Arieli. Rabbi Yitzchak Arieli was the Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Merkaz Arav. He was a big Talmud of Rav Kook. So the Einayim L'Mishpat Brachas Taf Lamed Hamed Beis, he brings down the Chasam Sefer, and he asks on the Chasam Sefer, says, but he brings our Medrash. In our Medrash, and he's understanding it the same way that we're understanding it, sort of. And he's saying that in our Medrash, sounds like the question was, the way he understands it is, was Yitzchak planting grain? No, Chas v'Shalom. Of course he was learning. How could you say he was planting grain? Right? And then the answer is, okay, he was doing a different mitzvah also of tzedakah or whatever. But you see from our Medrash that even in Eretz Yisroel, because we know Yitzchak lived in Eretz Yisroel, still you should be learning rather than engaging in agriculture. So you see that the agriculture itself is not a mitzvah. So you see from this Medrash that we pass in like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and you should always be learning and not being engaging in agriculture. That's the Einayim L'Mishpat's kasha on the Chasam Sefer. Unless at the end of the day, the hachra, right? The final psak, the Gemara says over there, and the way that most people understand it is like this. The Gemara says, Omar Abaye, Harbe also Rabbi Shmuel, but also biyadon, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, v'lo also biyadon. Abaye says that many people did like Rabbi Shmuel and it worked out. They engaged in agriculture when it was needed or whatever, and a lot of people did like Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai and it didn't work out. So some people arrive from that line in the Gemara that it means we pass in like Rabbi Shmuel. But the mahalach, the popular mahalach is that what the Gemara means to say is that for the masses, harbe also Rabbi Yishmael, but also b'yadan. When a lot of people, when the masses are doing like Rabbi Yishmael, then it's going to work out. And then you'll have Yechidim that can do like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But if the masses do like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, then it's not going to work out. That's more or less the mainstream mahalach. So if you learn that, let's say you go like that psak, so then what's the medrash over here talking about? Yitzchak was a yachid. So you would have to say that Yitzchak, we understood that Yitzchak was like, if anyone is going to be the one to dedicate his life to learning instead of engaging in agriculture, we would say that it would be Yitzchak. And on that you could say chas v'shalom to say that Yitzchak was Zara Dagon, even at the time of Dagon. Even though we paskin like Rabbi Shmuel. That's the point. But so the Medrash says, "V'chol davar she'iser." I'm going weiter. V'chol davar she'iser. From everything that Yitzchak Avinu took, Maaser, Hevila HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mea Sha'arim Shel Mamayin Uverchai. Everything from every type of species that Yitzchak took Maaser, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him 100 times that amount for his money, and Hashem gave him a bracha. The Kach Nemar V'Yivarcheu Hashem. That's why it says in the pasuk, Hashem gave him a bracha. So Rabbi Pomerantz, just to repeat what he said a few minutes ago, said an interesting idea. He said that it could be that the reason why Yitzchak himself was the one who planted it is so that he'll get this special bracha of getting 100 times what's coming to him. It could be true, but if Hashem is giving a bracha to Yitzchak in Yitzchak's estate, I don't know why it would dafka be that Yitzchak would have to be the one that planted. His chus, but I'm saying if he owns it, it's also his chus, no? I'm not sure. But there's other midrashim that say that what does it mean? He found 100 times. 100 times what? So 100 times worth of what? So the Medrash says that in the beginning of the year, Yitzchak made an estimate, or he made some sort of evaluation and tried to figure out exactly how much money is he going to make this year, so that he'll know what to give to the poor people already at the beginning of the year before he even made the money. And then it came out that Hashem gave him a bracha, and he got 100 times more than he expected to get. So he got to give more Maaser. But the Medrash is saying like it's a shvach of Yitzchak that he tried to figure out how much to give before he even had the money to give it. Fine. So that's the idea of the story of Yitzchak. Now, as I said in the beginning, we're going to segue now towards the sugya of Techiyas HaMeisim, and then we're going to be talking about Techiyas HaMeisim for the next few weeks. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Oh, Agav, I forgot to mention that we said that the words chas v'shalom over here is shtickle problematic. So I wrote down over here that the Radal in the Radal's print of Pirkei Eliezer, it doesn't have the words chas v'shalom. But then I wrote that in the Kafter Vaferach, who's one of the Rishonim in Perek Aleph, Kafter Vaferach, he brings down this medrash and he has the word chas v'shalom. So the word chas v'shalom is supposed to be there. Fine. So let's go back there. Rabbi Shimon Omer. Rabbi Shimon says, Mikayach Tzedakah HaMeisim Asidin L'chyos. Rabbi Shimon says that through the power of Tzedakah, the dead are destined to live. Meaning the idea of Techiyas HaMeisim, that people who are dead are going to come back to life, the resurrection of the dead, is going to come about through the power of Tzedakah. And we find that the power of Tzedakah is that it can bring a dead person back to life. And we're going to bring a few proofs to this from different stories in Tanakh. That the zchus, the koyach of tzedakah has the ability to take a person who's dead and bring him back to life. And the Radal points out that it's very appropriate that the bracha of Techiyas HaMeisim is the second bracha of Shemoneh Esrei, because we said before that the second bracha of Shemoneh Esrei has to do with Yitzchak, and Yitzchak died and come back to life, and the second bracha is the idea of Yitzchak, Gevurah at the Gibor La'olam Hashem. Right? And Yitzchak is the Indian of Gevurah as opposed to Chesed. Chesed, Avram Avinu is the first bracha, Zeicher Chasdei Avos, that's Avram Avinu. The first bracha is Avram, the second bracha is Yitzchak, which is Gevurah, and in that bracha, it talks about Techiyas HaMeisim, and more so, we just finished saying that Yitzchak was known for his tzedakah. We just spoke about that right now. And in fact, earlier in Perek Chav Zayin, at the end of the Perek, we discussed if Yitzchak was the person who invented the idea of Maaser. Could be Avram Avinu invented the idea of Maaser. Could be Yitzchak, Machlekes Rambam and Ravid and Hilchos Melachim Perek Tes. We spoke about that in the end of Perek Chav Zayin. before we get on to the Medrash's first proof, I'll just say over an idea from the Mabit. The Mabit in his Sefer Beis Elikim in the Shara Yisodis, I forgot which parak it is, like from parak like Nun Gimel to parak Samach, I think it was. The Mabit has a whole arichos. The other Sefer called Beis Elikim in Shara Yisodis, he talks about the 13 ikrim of the Rambam, the 13 articles, principles of faith of the Rambam, and he talks about them in depth, with an in-depth analysis. He brings proofs and questions and explains it, etc. So the Mabit, when he's talking about Techiyas HaMeisim, has like many prakim about Techiyas HaMeisim. I think it's from like Nun Gimel to the Parak Samach. And he has a whole arichos about it. I didn't finish going through it yet, but I'm still working on it. Al Koponim, the Mabit says that what's the inyan of Atah Gibor La'olam Hashem? What does that have to do with Mechayim Meisim? Why is Hashem called a Gibor having to do with Techiyas HaMeisim? So the idea is, the Lashon is Atah Gibor La'olam Hashem. You, Hashem, are a Gibor La'olam. You are always a Gibor. It says that normally you have a Gibor. What's a Gibor? A Gibor is a strong man. He's a weightlifter. He's a wrestler. I don't know. He's a strong person. Yeah, he's strong. Gibor. He has koyach, right? So normally, when you talk about humans, so a person, when he's younger, let's say, he's a 5-year-old, so you're not going to say this 5-year-old is mamish a Gibor, right? Because he's not lifting weights, and he's not a strong person, whatever, right? As he gets up to a certain age, so then he gets to a stage in life where now you can say, this guy is a Gibor, he's a strong man, whatever, right? And then, after he passes that, so then now he's no longer a Gibor. He's an 80-year-old man, right? Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he's an 80-year-old man, you're not going to say, Arnold Schwarzenegger is a Gibor. No, he's a wimpy old man that he doesn't have any koichos anymore, right? An old geezer, they say, right? So when we talk about a person being a Gibor, it's limited. A person is never going to be a Gibor his whole life. He's a Gibor for, let's say, from when he's 20 to like when he's 35. That's when he's a Gibor. Earlier than that, he's too weak. Later than that, he's also too weak. A person's Giborness is limited. But when we talk about Hashem, what's the what?
Just missed it.
You just missed it. I don't know. I just 35. It was arbitrary. 36. Okay.
I'm almost 38.
What?
65.
Okay, from 25 to 45. There you go. When we talk about Hashem being a Gibor, it's not Hashem Stam being a Gibor, like in the way that a person is a Gibor. Hashem is a Gibor La'olam. Hashem is always a Gibor. Hashem, the Gevurah of Hashem was that ability to create something out of nothing, to make man and like give him life. Right, all of that, Hashem has that all the way in the beginning of creation. Before the world was even created, Hashem had that ability to do it, and He did it. And then all the way at the end of creation, right, after Yemais Mashiach, by Olam Haba, when there's going to be Techiyas HaMeisim, Be'ezus Hashem, so we're going to see again, Hashem still has that koyach that He had all the way in the beginning, because He had that koyach the entire time. As opposed to a human Gibor, which only his Gevurah is limited, Hashem's Gevurah is La'olam Hashem. It's a Gibor La'olam Hashem. Kama Hashem, yeah. Right, so the Medrash is going to bring its first proof to the idea that Tzedakah brings Techiyas HaMeisim. We're only going to get through the first proof this week. Where do we learn this out from? That the schus of Tzedakah brings Techiyas HaMeisim? Eliyahu HaTishbi, from the story of Elijah the Tishbite. Meaning, we're going to see a story that there was a woman, a widow who helped sustain Eliyahu HaNavi, and her son's gonna die, and Eliyahu HaNavi is gonna bring the kid back to life. There, I ruined the ending for you. Right? Eliyahu HaNavi will bring the kid back to life. So why did he bring the kid back to life? Because she had a schus of tzedakah that she helped be mefarnes Eliyahu HaNavi. So therefore, she's gonna be zeicha that her kid is gonna be brought back to life even though he died. That's more or less the story. Because it sounds like, where do we learn it from? From Eliyahu HaNavi. That's not really true. We don't learn it from Eliyahu HaNavi himself. We learn it from the story of Eliyahu HaNavi. That's what I'm trying to explain. We learn it from Eliyahu HaTishbi. That he would go from mountain to mountain and from cave to cave, and he was wandering Jew. He went to a place called Tzarfas, which is not in France, it's in Lebanon, Pashtus. And a woman who was a widow, received him with great honor. She took him into his house and she fed him. The Radal brings, when we say that when she would have a meal in her house, so first she would feed Eliyahu HaNavi, then she would feed herself, and then she would feed her son. Right? He was mamish a part of their household, and the Radal says that this is mamish Mesiras Nefesh because it's muvur in the psukim that she was very poor. She didn't have so much money. She didn't have so much resources. And even though we say chayach al koidmin, if you're walking in the desert with your friend and you have a bottle of water and your friend doesn't have a bottle of water and you're both about to die, what do? You drink your own water. You don't give it to him, right? Still, she gave food to him first, and then to herself and her child, even though the food was scarce. We see that she's Maaser Nefesh. That's what it means, the covered gullah. It was a cover that she would give to him first. And she was Imay Shel Yonah. She was the mother of the Navi Yonah. Yonah ben Amitai, from the Sefer Yonah. You know the Sefer Yonah, he was the Talmud of Elisha, who was the Talmud of Eliyahu. He was the one who, he anointed Yehu as the king, etc. Yonah ben Amitai was no small stuff. He was big stuff. He was sent to Ashur. He was sent to Nineveh to give Ashur some Musar. So this woman who took in Eliyahu into her house, and she was the mother of Yonah HaNavi. Umipita umishamna hayu oichlim v'shoisim hu v'hi uvena. And from her bread and from her oil they would eat and they would drink. In this order, he and her son. Shinama, it says in the pasuk, "Vatechel hu v'hi." It says in the pasuk, he and she would eat. So it sounds like he was the ikr. He ate first, and then she would give him the food first, and then he would eat after. She would eat afterwards, and her son would eat afterwards. That's what she was being machabed him. Interestingly, it says over here that it says from their bread and their oil, from her bread and from her oil, they would eat and drink. So what's the drink? They would drink what? What's the from her bread and her oil? They would eat and drink. What? Okay, eat. I understand. You eat bread and oil. What do you do with oil? You eat oil, or oil is part of the food. What do you mean you drink? So the Radal takes out the word oil. The word drink. Sorry, the Radal takes out the word drink because you don't drink oil. He brings the Gemara in Mesachas Brachos on the same page that we just mentioned before. Lamed Hey Beis. The Gemara says. Amar Guf, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, V'chen Amar Yitzchak, Amar Yochanan. Shemen Zayis, Mavachan al Bar Priyates. If you drink olive oil, you make a Bar Priyates. And the Gemara says, "Whoa, hey Chidami, how is it possible to do such a thing? If you're telling me you just drink straight up olive oil, Azuki Mazikle, it's going to damage you. It's not healthy. It's not healthful. You can't just drink straight up olive oil." Elamai, the Gemara brings the teretz and says that you drink it with beet juice. Actually, it's not really beet juice. It's like water that you cooked beets in. So if you drink that with olive oil, so then it's like very healthy if you're sick or something. That's what the Gemara says. But you don't start and drink olive oil. So why is the Medrash over here saying that? Oh, he would eat the bread and drink the olive oil. You don't drink olive oil. So he takes out the word drink. He said like, I guess it means that you ate the bread with the olive oil or something like that. Fine. Omar Levi. So the pasuk says Vatechel hu v'hi, and he and she would eat. Omar Levi says like this: Hu v'hi ksiv. It says in the pasuk hu v'hi, he and she would eat. V'hi v'hu karinan, but there's a ksiv kriya in that pasuk, and even though the ksiv is, it says he and she, but the kri is she and he. So the way the Marzuk explains it like this, like it sounds like there's a shtickle steer over here. There's a contradiction. Which one is the ikr? Was he the main person because he's Eliyahu HaNavi, or was she the main person because she was the balabasta? She was the hostess, so she's the main one supplying the food. So rather, says the Medrash, b'zchus Eliyahu achlu. Really, both are the ikr. But in the merit of Eliyahu, they merited to eat food. Meaning that they both played a primary role in the food over here. Meaning Eliyahu HaNavi played a primary role because he was Eliyahu HaNavi, and it was in his chus that even though she was poor, Hashem gave them a special bracha that they were able to have what to eat. So it was in his chus. And then she played a primary role. That she was the hostess, and she was the one taking the achrayus and bringing the food and making everything. So it was also in her schus. So that's why in the Ksiv it says him first, and in the Kri it says her first. Fine. La'achar yomim, after days, and at some point, meaning Chala ben ha'isha v'meis. The son of that woman became sick and he died. Shinemar, it says in the pasuk, Vayihi achar hadvrim ha'ela Chala ben ha'isha. It was after those matters that happened, Chala ben ha'isha, the son of the woman, got sick. Now the Medrash over here is saying a slight chiddush that he died. We're going to see later on that some of our Hashem understood that the kid didn't really die. The pasuk doesn't say explicitly that the kid died. Be'ezer Hashem, we're going to see later in the parak when we talk about Elisha with the kid of the Ben Shunamis. So over there, the pasuk says explicitly that the kid died. Over here, the pasuk doesn't say explicitly that the kid died, but the Medrash is saying that the kid died. Fine. We'll get back to that point in a few minutes. So her kid died. Amra Eloi ha'isha. The woman said to Eliyahu HaNavi, Yomru. Now this is an interesting thing that she said to him, and we have to exactly understand what she means. Yomru, they're gonna say, Kivasa elai betashmi shamita. They're gonna say that you came upon me in relations, that you had relations with me. V'iskarta avoni alai, and Hashem, or you caused my sin to be remembered upon me. Umeis b'ni, and because of that, my son died. Ella toil mashahevesa elai v'sein li as b'ni. Rather, take away what you gave to me. I don't care about your bracha. I don't want your brachas anymore, and just give me back my son. That's what she says to him. She said, they're gonna say that you had relations with me, and that's why my son died, and so therefore I don't want your brachas. Just give me back my son. So what's she saying over here? What's happening? What are they gonna say? So there's a few explanations over here in the Mefarshim. The Marzu explains that what she was saying. First of all, it's obvious from the Hemshech, or we didn't see yet, but we're going to see in the Hemshech that she didn't literally mean what she meant, what she's saying. Rather, what she was trying to say was, she was trying to say something provocative in order to get Eliyahu to really pray really hard so that the kid will come back to life. Because she knew, we're assuming the kid is dead, and if you want the kid to come back to life, you have to daven. But you have to daven really, really hard. So how am I going to get you to daven really, really hard? I'm going to say something that's going to affect you and want you to really, really make this happen. So she's saying that what it seems that she's saying is that if you don't get my kid back to life, so people are going to make rumors about you and me that we're having some sort of relationship over here, and you don't want that to happen. So you better pray really well that this kid comes back to life. That's more or less what she was saying. Now, exactly what was her taina? So the Mefarshim say in a few different ways. The Marzu says that the rumor she was trying to tell him was that people are going to say that you wanted to have relations with me, and therefore what you did was you davened to Hashem and you reminded Hashem about some sort of aver that I must have done in order so that Hashem will cause my son to die, and then when my son is dead, then you'll be able to be alone with me, and then then you could do whatever you want. That would be the rumor. So rather, what you have to do is daven really hard so that the son will come back to life, so people won't say this rumor about you. That's what the Marzu said. Now, what the shaila is, one of the guys who listens to this shir in America over the internet, his name is Tzvi Unger, he's a friend of mine from America. So he sent me, he knew we were about to do Perek Lamed Gimel, so he sent me a shtickle Torah from the same sefer called Dvar Halacha, I think it was called, where he talks about, is there a problem of yichud over here with Eliyahu HaNavi and this lady? Because she's an unmarried lady. You have Eliyahu HaNavi living, being secluded sometimes together, even though she had a kid, but the kid doesn't work at night. All the different issues from a halachic perspective of Hilchas Yichud. He sent me a whole shtickle Torah about this. I don't want to really get into that, but when I send out the email about the shir, I guess I'll send that as an attachment if you want to look at that shtickle Torah. That's the Marzuz Mahal. The Radal says it a little bit differently. The Radal says that she's alluding to a different thing. That there's not that sound that you try to kill the kid in order that you'll be secluded with me and you can do what you want. Rather, he's alluding to a Gemara that says that it's a Gemara in Bava Metzia, Ayin Aleph and Aleph. The Gemara says that a Talmid Chacham should not live in the same courtyard as a widow because of Mishum Chashada, because of suspicion. People are going to say rumors that maybe there's something hanky-panky going on between the two or something. Right? So the Gemara says that Talmid Chacham is not supposed to live in the same courtyard as an Almana. So she's telling him that, now that my son died, so people are going to start being chaysh at us. Maybe there's something going on in between us or something like that. And actually, in fact,
why don't the rumors only come after the kid died, not before? Because the Isser is going on all the time. He's in fact, because the difference that the kid was never known. Maybe the same making that people will make such a cheshbon that the kid died because of an affair.
So the Radal and Rabbi Yomi Izmir, more or less, they say that because you're not supposed to do this, and it's a problem of chashad that people are going to think you're doing something wrong, or whatever. So it itself becomes an avera, and then they're going to think that the kid died because they were over this avera, they were over an avera. So what's the avera? Like if Hashem killed the kid because they did something wrong, that sort of makes it there must be something really wrong, because look, Hashem even gave them an einish for it, right? Something like that. That makes it look even worse. That's
a very difficult cheshbon to.
Yeah. This is what she was.
About cause and effect. There must be a good authority.
I mean, well, first of all, they lived in the time of the Beis in the time that Beis Mikdash stood. People were so connected to Ruchnius that people were able to see things in a different way than we see things nowadays. They were able to see things in a way that if something happened, it must be that there was something, if something bad happened to somebody, you could almost see it, that there was something that guy did wrong. Even if you don't know necessarily exactly what he did wrong, but you could almost see that this guy did something wrong, and that's why it came to him. They were much more in touch with these spiritual things that were going on in the world. Nowadays, it's very hard for us to even think about that something bad happened because he deserved it. It's a foreign concept almost. But I think back then they were much more connected to these things. So she was telling him that you better daven for him to come back to life, because otherwise it's going to look really bad for you. Okay, we'll go weiter in a moment, but just one nikud over here. Okay, we'll finish off this. We'll go weiter in the story. Right. So what happens? Eliyahu got up, and he prayed in front of Hashem. And he said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, is it not enough for you, all these bad things that happen upon me and upon my head? Eliyahu HaNavi is running away from the government, and there's a bounty, and they're trying to kill him, or whatever. But also this woman, that I know about her, that she's only speaking about this because of the pain that she has over her son. And that's why she said something like this to La'aksheni, to do something wrong to me. She only wronged me because she's in so much pain, but it's not really true. There really isn't a chashad, right? And Hashem, you're going to cause this sorrow also to happen? The way the Radal has a slightly different girsa. It says, that not that. The way I understood it was that Eliyahu HaNavi was saying that this woman that she said this horrible chashad about us or whatever, I know that she was only saying it because she's in bad circumstances and she's just trying to get me to daven really hard, and mitzad me, I'm moichel her. The way the Radal has the girsa is that stop, Hashem, you know that what she's saying is not true. But stop, just to be in this situation, this unpleasant situation, it's not a good situation for us to be in. So rather, Eliyahu HaNavi says to Hashem, I'm asking you, Hashem, that you should, daven. I'm davening for her, that you should revive her son, bring him back to life, right? And the Radal adds that Bistama, he said also in the schus of the tzedakah that she gave for him, Meaning Eliyahu HaNavi is telling Hashem, like, I have nothing against her, even though she said this like nasty thing against me, but I know she was only doing it because she's out of distress, but really she's a big balas tzedakah, and he's trying to be ma'or her zchus of tzedakah. Right? Achshav yildu adaris sheis Techiyas HaMeisim, and if you revive the kid, so all the subsequent generations are going to learn from this that there is a concept of Techiyas HaMeisim. So Hashem es nefesh hayaled, please Hashem return the soul of the kid and allow him to come back to life. Says the Medrash, v'nat arloi, and Hashem listened to him, and the kid came back to life. Shinamar v'yishma Hashem b'kol Eliyahu v'goyim. Hashem listened to the voice of Eliyahu, etc., and the kid came back to life. And as the Radal points out, and this is the Hamshech of the Medrash, the reason why the kid came back to life is because this woman was such a big balas tzedakah. So we said before that the koyach of tzedakah is that it could bring back dead people to life. So that's why the kid came back to life, right? That's Adkan the story over here. The kid came back to life because she was a big balas tzedakah. But so there's a few issues. We're not going to go to the next story tonight, but there's a few issues over here that have to be discussed. The first one is the Radal himself. The Radal himself said that what she was saying to him was that if you don't bring the kid back to life, so people are going to say that you were over this Gemara that says that a Talmid Chacham is not allowed to live in the same courtyard as an almana, and therefore that's why the kid died. So therefore you should bring the kid back to life. That's what the Radal said, right? So the question is, how was Eliyahu HaNavi allowed to do it? Fine, you're telling me that let's say that's not really why the kid died, and people aren't really going to say it or whatever. She was just doing it to get him to daven harder. But what was the heter? And in fact, this halacha that a person is not allowed to, Talmid Chacham is not allowed to live in the same courtyard as a almana, is brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, Even HaEzer, Siman Chof Beis, Siv Yud Zayin. The Shulchan Aruch brings down this halacha. It's a Gemara. The Shulchan Aruch brings down halacha, and on the Shulchan Aruch there's a sefer called Shaila Meira on Even HaEzer. It's written by the author of the Teshuvas Shalom Meshiv, and he brings down our Medrash over here, and he asks, how is Eliyahu HaNavi allowed to do it? The Shulchan Aruch paskins that it's also a Talmid Chacham to live in the same courtyard as an almana. How can he do it?
I don't understand the question. He wasn't living there. He was a guest.
No, but he was. It sounded like he was living there.
Yeah.
He was living there on some sort of temporary basis or even semi-permanent basis. If you look at the stories, in towards the end of Malachim Aleph, you'll see that it sounds like he was mamish living there. Because they talk about like he had his own room, etc. Also, the Gemara in the beginning of Brachos talks about it. Where is it in Brachos?
Maybe living just means to spend the night, and he spent the night there.
Where is it in Brachos? 1 second.
Meaning the question of living is.
You remember where it is in Brachos?
What?
Where it talks about Eliyahu HaNavi living by this lady. It said that
she put him in the attic. She put him in the aliyah.
Yeah, and the Gemara says that she saw that he was kaddish because he didn't have any zera on the bedding and different things like that.
Okay, say.
I don't remember the Gemara. It's in Brachos.
Go ahead.
It's Chazar Brachos. So the Shalom Meshiv asks this question. He says Tzarech in. That's how he lives it off. He doesn't know exactly what was Eliyahu HaNavi's heter. Last I found the Zayis Ran on my favorite sefer, I guess now, on the Yalkut Shemaini in Sefer Malachim. The Zayis Ran on Yalkut Shemaini in Sefer Malachim Remez Reish Tes. He talks about this medrash over here, and he says what I consider a wild pshat, and then I'll tell you why it's I think it's worse than a wild pshat. But he says that there's a Gemara in Yevamos that says that different Amiroim, when they would go from one city to a different city, so they would send somebody ahead of them and say, okay, who wants to be this Amir's temporary wife for his visit to that city? And the Gemara says that they wouldn't actually have relations with those women, but they had, if they needed to, then they would, so that they would have pas pasale, so that they won't end up doing some sort of affair. That's more or less what the Gemara says over there. So the Zayis Ranan says that's also what Eliyahu HaNavi was doing over here. Really, he wasn't he wasn't stam, let's say, doing yichud with her or stam hanging out with her, whatever. She was the woman that, like, when he stays in this city, so she is like his potential wife, that he could marry her, but like it might say he didn't marry her. But like, so that way he would have pas pasalo and he wouldn't have taivas to do other affairs. That's what the Zayis Rana says about Eliyahu HaNavi here. It's a far-fetched pshat, but it's more. It's very difficult for me to accept this pshat because, first of all, there's an assumption all over the place that Eliyahu HaNavi has another name, and his name is Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Eliyahu HaNavi is the same person as Pinchas. Yeah. Now we know that Pinchas was a Kohen Gadol, or at least was a Kohen Mashiach Malchama, and the halacha is that he's not allowed to marry an almana. If this woman is an almana, so how can you say that like she's like there like as if like if he needs to, so he'll marry her. Like even to just do kedushin to her, according to many tzaddim, just to do kedushin is already an isra of a kohen gadol marrying an almana, maybe. But so how could you say that that's what Pinchas was doing? And how's the pas pasala if it's going to be aser? So then so it's impossible. And the Gemara says that there's an isra of tivul and lenaseh, and the tivul and lenaseh is not necessarily. It's a struggle difficult pshat to say that's why Eliyahu HaNavi was able to do this, what he's doing over here. It's a little bit difficult. I spoke to a friend of mine, Yosef Don. What?
Sorry, I think you're right to say that, because if it wasn't so difficult to say that, the Medrash wouldn't.
There wouldn't be a chashad.
There wouldn't be a chashad.
Everyone would know.
She wouldn't say that.
Yeah, I don't know.
She wouldn't say that.
So my friend, I spoke to a friend of mine, Yosef Don Snow. He lives here in Beitar, a friend of mine. I told him about this question. I actually told him my kasha on the Zayis Ranan. But he said he wanted to go with a different approach. The Gemara says that Tavel Chacham is not allowed to live in the same courtyard as an almana. Yeah. So the shaila is why? So the Gemara said because of chashad. Yeah. Now he wanted to say that where to say such a chashad? Where do we get that idea from? So he wanted to say that maybe we got that idea from this story. That because Eliyahu HaNavi was living with this lady in the same, let's say the same house, courtyard, or whatever, so then she claimed to him that people are going to make this chashad. But could be beforehand, we never knew there was such a chashad. So he wants to say that Gemara is only coming from this story. So Eliyahu HaNavi didn't do anything wrong because the Gemara is talking about Eliyahu HaNavi. It's saying the Gemara is saying, like, don't make the same mistake that Eliyahu HaNavi made. But you can't say that he's going against that Gemara because that Gemara came after the story of Eliyahu HaNavi. It's something to think about. As I'm talking right now, I'm thinking. I have to put this 1 second.
This is the best shiur I've ever been to in my life.
1 second.
What is that, Ebenezer?
Ebenezer, Chaf Beis, Yud Zayin. So if you look at the Pesukim in Sefer Malachim, the question is like, is Eliyahu HaNavi married or not? That's a big question. You don't see either way B'chlal in the Pesukim. It sounds like Eliyahu HaNavi is not married B'chlal. But L'mayasa, the Mabit says in Beis Elikim that every Navi was married. Every person who had Nevuah was married before he had Nevuah. He wants to say that the only place where we see explicitly that he wasn't married is Yaakov Avinu, because Yaakov Avinu had a dream. Before he went to Lavan's house, he had the dream with the ladder, and then the Mapit says that Hagufa, that wasn't really the highest darga of Nevuah, that was a dream, which is the lower darga of Nevuah. But he says that every Navi was married when he had his Nevuah. So Uchar Eliyahu HaNavi was married. So maybe it could be that because he was married, so then he would be allowed to live in the same courtyard as this almana because it isn't such a chashad. So the Mechaber in Eben Ezer, when he brings down this halacha, the Mechaber says like this: Also the Talmid Chacham lishkein b'chatzer sheyesh by almana Afila einu misyachid ima. It's also for a Talmid Chacham to dwell in the same courtyard as an almana, even if he's not secluding himself with her. Mipnei chashad, because of the suspicion. Ela im kein ishtei imay, unless his wife is with him. So maybe we could say that Eliyahu HaNavi was. We just proved before that he was married. Maybe we'll say that he was not only was he married, his wife was also with him, even though the psukim don't talk about his wife for whatever reason. But maybe that's the heter because his wife was there with him. I don't know.
The same thing to say. I don't know. We're saying Talmid Chacham all the time. Is it not that Talmid Chacham is the same? There's no, I think there's a different. What's it called?
I don't know.
Different thing. Talmid Chacham is not a Kodesh person. It's just someone that who listens all the time. It could be a Gevurah, but a Navi, it's a different darga. Maybe it's not just a slight difference.
Why does the Gemara say Talmid Chacham?
That would be the smallest person that would be not allowed called Chomer or anyone greater than a Talmid Chacham.
Maybe. The Gemara says Talmid Chacham because the Talmid Chacham is the Gemara says because he's tznuah. I don't remember exactly what that means in this context, but you would have to really go through this again and try to figure it out. But that's not what we're trying to do over here. Okay, there's one last discussion over here. It's a shtickle important discussion along the similar lines of Eliyahu HaNavi being Pinchas the Kohen, right? So the shaila is, if the kid died, as Medrash over here says explicitly that the Ben Atarfasis, the son of this woman from Tzarfas died, so it says in the Pesukim that Eliyahu HaNavi stretched himself upon the kid and he breathed into him, whatever, and the kid came back to life. Right, so the shaila is, how could Eliyahu HaNavi do such a thing? If he's a Kohen is not allowed to touch a dead body, right? So how can he touch a dead body if he's a Kohen?
He's allowed to touch a dead body.
He is?
He's allowed.
7 exceptions, but maybe this is to bring someone back to life. Maybe another exception.
Where do we see such a thing? Okay, so there's 5 answers to this question. And we'll say over the 5 answers, and I guess we'll stop after that. What?
He was dead, but he was trying to.
Okay. So
afterwards, it was already alive.
So there's a shtickle famous Gemara in Mesachas Bava Metzia Daf Kuf Yudalad Amid Alpha Days that the Gemara says that Rabba Baravua Ashkecher Rabba Baravua Eliyahu the Koi Bebeis Kfar Shel Avdei Kachavim. Rabba Baravua, who apparently was good friends with Eliyahu HaNavi, and he would bump into Eliyahu HaNavi quite often. There's more than one story in Shas where Rabba Baravua bumped into Eliyahu HaNavi. It says that he bumped into Eliyahu HaNavi when Eliyahu HaNavi was inside a Goyish cemetery. He was inside a Goyish graveyard. And he asked him some shilas about bankruptcy, halachas, whatever. And then afterwards, Rabbi Baravua said to him, Omelei, lav kayin umar? So Rabbi Baravua said to Eliyahu HaNavi, he said, I don't understand, aren't you a kayin? My tama kayin mar bebeis hakvaros. What are you doing in a cemetery? You're a kayin, you're not allowed to be here. Omelei. So Eliyahu HaNavi said back to him, Learn mostly Mar Tyrus. Didn't you learn Seder Tyrus? There's a brayso that says Reb Shimon Yochai Omer that it says Ve'ata Toni Marisi Adam Atem. The Klal Yisrael is called Adam. Ve'en Ovdei Kachavim Kurim Adam, and Goyim are not called Adam. And by Parshas Tumas Meis it says Adam Kiyamus Ba'il. Adam when he dies, and Goy is not called Adam, so therefore a Goy doesn't have Tumas Meis. At least that's where the Gemara seems to be on the side of Tumas Oil or whatever. So the point is that he's saying that I hold like Reb Shimon Yochai that a Goyish kaver is not going to make me tummy, so that's why I'm here. But you learn Tyrus, you should know this. So he answered back, no, we only learn 4 Sdarim of Shas, we don't learn 6 Sdarim of Shas, because only 4 are Negeh nowadays, plus Kachim, we have Moed, Nashim, Nezikim, plus Kachim, because even though it's not Negeh, but it's Nisham Parim Sasenos, so we learn Kachim. So he said, but Zrayim and Tyrus we don't learn because it's not Negeh. Or in Bavel it wasn't Negeh. Bavel. Right, so he says, I didn't learn that. Fine. That's more or less the story here. There's a few other nekudas in the story, but I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, that's the story. Asks Taisus, Kufi Dalan Mebez Mamitzia. Table the read. Wonderment to the read. Hichya binat shel ha'almana. How did this same guy, Eliyahu HaNavi, How did he revive the son of this almana from Tzarfas? Because he was a Kohen. It says in Pasuk, and he stretched himself over the child. How can he do such a thing? He's a Kohen. It's Maaser. So answers Tesis. Answer 1. You can answer. It was clear to Eliyahu HaNavi that he would be able to revive the kid. Therefore, it was mutter for him to stretch himself upon the kid because it's like pikuach nefesh. Which is, it's a chiddush, because pikuach nefesh means somebody who's alive, who's about to die. You're allowed to be over an iser in order to save him. Here, it's the opposite. He's dead, but I could bring him back to life, and I know I could bring him back to life. So there, Tesa says that's also mutter because of pikuach nefesh, because you could save him. It's not exactly the same chiddush as pikuach nefesh, but it's the same idea. Because he knew he was going to be able to revive him. That's the first teretz. That's Tesis' teretz. Now, others say other ideas. The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim in Chelek Aleph, Simen Perek Mem Beis, brings in the name of the Andalusim, the sages of Andalusia, which is Spain. Right? Andalusia. There you go. The Andalusia. So the Rambam brings in the name of those people, and also the Radak says this in his Pirish in Malachim, and also the Tesis Rabbeinu Peretz, they all say this idea, that they want to say that no, really, the kid didn't die. He just fainted, he looked like he was dead. Here, even though our medrash says explicitly that the kid was dead, the pasuk doesn't say the kid died. The pasuk just says he was sick, and I think the pasuk says Vayis Aleph, that the lashon of the pasuk is that he fainted, and therefore they want to say that that's why it was mutter for Eliyahu HaNavi, because Eliyahu HaNavi that the kid wasn't really dead, so he was allowed to spread himself upon the kid to help revive the kid.
But then that doesn't answer the question. Right? Meaning the question doesn't start then.
Right, they're saying the question doesn't start. He wasn't really dead.
And you can't learn
Techiyas. Right. They bring a raya because there's a Gemara in Mesachas Nida, Ayin Amid Beis, that they asked Rabbi Shua that what's the halacha of the Ben Shunamis, is it tamei? If you have a guy who died and came back to life, is he tamei or not? Right? So the question is, why did the Gemara Dafka ask about Ben Shunamis and not Ben Tzarfas? Ben Shunamis is a story with Elisha, we're going to see later in the parak. Yeah. Right, where it's explicit in the pasuk that the kid died, and why does the Gemara ask about the Ben Tzarfas, which happened earlier? Elamai, from here you could see that maybe you could say that the Ben Tzarfas didn't really die. That's what some of these people want to say. The Barbanel in his Pirish on the Moreh Nevuchim, he says that no, the Rambam doesn't hold. The Rambam is bringing that b'shem the Chachmei Andalusia, but he doesn't hold of that answer himself. The Rambam doesn't hold like that. Rather, the Rambam himself holds the third answer. We're going to say the Rambam himself holds that the reason why it was mutter for Eliyahu HaNavi to go upon the kid was Hayras Shah. Yeah, he was a Navi. Hashem could tell a Navi to temporarily suspend an Isra Minatera. So that was the mechanism that allowed Eliyahu HaNavi to do that over here. Hayras Shah. That's the Rambam's teretz. That's what the Barbanel says is the Rambam's teretz. The Radvaz in Chuvas Radvaz Chelek Hey Simin 2203 also says this teretz, and also the Tesis Arash and Mesachas Bava Metzia says this teretz. Fine. So that's our third teretz. That was fourth teretz?
The third one, I guess.
What? Third one.
With the second one, it says that when
third teretz.
Yeah. Was davening, it says עכשיו ילמדו הדורות שיש Techiyas HaMeisim אשר יש נפש הילד. אשר נפש הילד?
Again, our medrash definitely says explicitly that the kid was dead. We said that in Pirkei Eliezer.
In the beginning, really the same. It's like he was chala.
No, chala ben ish of a mace.
No.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, you have it. Right, the line before that.
Oh, sorry. He
died. That says he died.
Oh, because it's just a shenema, yeah.
Because it brings a puzzle, but the puzzle doesn't say it explicitly. Right. So the medrash says that he died, but if you go like the medrash, let's say you would have to say like Tesis that he knew the kid was going to come back to life, so it's mutter. The second teretz you said is that he didn't really die; he only fainted. The third teretz now we're saying is the Rambam, Tesis Arash, and the Red Vaz are saying that Hayras Shah really technically should be Aser, but Hashem gave him the ability to temporarily suspend the Isser. The fourth teretz is Rabbeinu Bechai in Sefer Bamidbar, Parak Chav Hey, Pasuk Yud Aleph. This is a little, original teretz. Rabbeinu Bechai says that this woman, this lady that from Tzarfas, she wasn't Jewish. She was a guy, and her son wasn't Jewish either. He was a guy, and therefore Eliyahu HaNavi was allowed to spread himself upon her to bring the kid back to life because he wasn't Jewish. So, just like the Gemara says that he had like Rav Shimon Bar Yochai that a guy is not metameh mezim. So it's the same thing over there. The only problem is that our medrash just said that she's the mother of Yonah ben Amitai, Yonah the Navi. So that doesn't work with our medrash. It could be it's going with a different shita. Just like the Chachmei and Lucy are also not going with our medrash. Okay, so that's the teretz. The fifth teretz is the Chochmas Betzalel, or Betzalel Ransberg. Actually, the name of his sefer Masechas Nida is really Pischei Nida, but for some reason when Maaser of Cook reprinted the sefer, they called it Chochmas Betzalel, but it's really called Pischei Nida. And also the Aruch LaNer in Masechas Nida, Daf Ayin and Beis, they say another teretz that works with our medrash. Our medrash said that this mother, no, she was Jewish, and she was the mother of Yonah. Yeah? So they say that Yonah was a tzaddik. Yonah was a big navi, right? He was a tzaddik. And there's an idea brought in Tesis in the end of Ksubis that tzaddikim and misoson are not metame because tzaddikim and misoson kurim chayim. Tzaddikim, even when they're dead, they're alive, so therefore they're not metame. It's a big shaila halacha l'maisa about going for a Kohen to go to Gevurah tzaddikim. I know there's some Sfaradim are makel about it, some Chasidim are makel about it. If you're going to the cave of a tzaddik, you're allowed to go because a tzaddik doesn't give off tumah. There's a lot written about this. It's a whole sugya, but there is such an idea. It's brought in a thesis in Mesachos Ksubis that tzaddikim and misosim are not metame. So they want to taina that's how Eliyahu HaNavi was able to do this because Yonah was a tzaddik and therefore he was able to touch him even though he was dead because a tzaddik is not metame. Fine. That's basically it. Any questions? No.